Hello, my name is Robert Bourbonnais, and this is a demo reel of some of my automation work. It will give you an idea of using IntelliJ IDE to write automated tests, Maven, Jenkins continuous integration, and JMeter stress testing. One of the first things that I do is to do an analysis of the website to kind of see what main elements there are and where they're located and what's on one page and what's on another. So today I'm going to take a look at the Creative Live website. That there is a top navigation area, a link to a shopping cart, a login page, photo week link that's going to change on a regular basis. Most of these other ones are going to stay pretty much the same. The drop down will change. At the bottom we have a bottom navigation area with various links on the left hand side. In the middle there are icon links. Center section has a carousel at the top. Then it has a series of tiles. It's important to distinguish between things that are going to stay relatively the same and things that are going to be changing on a regular basis, because the way you handle them in test automation is different, so that you don't have to keep changing your tests all the time. Firebug lets me take a look at the elements that have been returned to me, so I can find things like title of the page, say, well, the title should be this. Firepath, figure out how to access individual items within the page. While doing this site analysis, I take notes. Next, I create a project in IntelliJ, and I pull the site analysis text into that, and I use that to design a series of classes that will model the website. I have a class for the Creative Live website. Here's the component for the bottom nav area, the bottom nav social icon links, the top nav component. The different components as well as the home page have pages associated with them that they can jump out to. The bottom nav, for instance, has the about page, the blog page, the contact page, help page, all the different pages associated with it. The carousel doesn't have very many pages called out because we develop those pages dynamically because they're always changing. Same thing with the tiles. The top nav has quite a few pages associated with it. By decomposing these items into pages, we end up with objects that know how to do things like display themselves, test their own links, wait for the Ajax items to show up on the page before doing anything else. All those things that are part of automated testing become contained in the different components. Icon links that are at the bottom of the page, they actually link to pages that are not within the Creative Live website. So I put them under their own pages area. Here would be the Facebook page and the Google Plus page and the Instagram page, the Pinterest page, the Twitter page, YouTube pages. That allows me to keep track of them by the site they're at. We need to add other things later. For instance, maybe you wanted to go to Facebook and then do a series of events there, then we have a container to place those additional pages. Once I've modeled the basic structure of the website, I can start moving on to more complicated constructs. For instance, use cases. For instance, here's a login, logout use cases that creates a Creative Live website. It tells it to go ahead and log me in, and here's my username and password, and then go ahead and log me out. And the site itself knows how to use that. It knows what pages to call and how to pass things, how to fill out forms. Another example of a use case, here's an online classes use case that would enroll in a class, for instance. And all it would have to do is call the site and say, okay, log in, here's my username and here's my password. Go to the enrollment page and unenroll everything. Then go to the tiles and enroll in the first tile. So it'll actually go through the tiles on the page, find one that you can enroll in, and it will enroll you in it. Then it's going to go back to the enroll page, check that that new one is there, unenroll it, and then basically log the home page. So it would do that whole sequence series of events. The other class that is important that I use for each one of my projects is a Selenium Driver class, that what type of a browser I want: Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Internet Explorer, Safari, HTML unit. What operating system I want to be running under: Win 7, Win 8, Mac, Mountain Lion, iPad, iPhone, Android. And what type of a grid I want to be running under, whether it's none or whether I'm doing the standard Selenium grid, whether I'm going to go out to a sauce grid on the cloud. And then it provides me all these different browsers so that I don't have to be doing that all the time. It also keeps track of what browser I'm using and allows me to use the same browser for multiple projects so that I don't have to stop and restart the browser all the time. Creating this series of class objects takes some time setting it all up, but once it's all set up, it's relatively quick and easy to actually write the tests against the objects because the objects are aware and they know how to deal with things themselves. So we have a whole separate area down here that I use for the tests. Typically, the first thing I would do is I would create some coverage tests that would go and make sure that different areas of the application are covered. For instance, here's the bottom nav page. Go to the site, tell it to load its home page, and then it's going to go to the bottom nav and say, let's load all of those pages, let's give it a test. Go ahead and let this run, go about testing the application, testing some of the pages, making sure that the linkage was working, making sure that various things about the pages are working correctly. There it goes, and it's coming up. Now it's going to go down to the, well, it's testing to make sure that it is the Creative Live site. And now it's going to go to the About page. Take a look at that. And because all these different pages are done with page objects, basically we can have, add individual tests to each one of the page. If we want to, for instance, test and make sure that there's always a big image right at the top of the page, we can call that up in its own web page and make sure that that is there and what it's supposed to be, and that there's always a title, there's always different components. Now it's going to the blog now. And the advantages of having some of these automated testings is, let's say someone went and broke the blog, okay? Now it would try to navigate there, and if we had different things set saying that, there should be items over here on the right side, what they should contain, or there should be a heading or whatever, and any of those things were missing, then our test would say, hey, it used to work, but now it doesn't look quite right. If we put it into Jenkins, it can send an email to the engineer saying blog page is now broken. Test the help page that's out there on Zoho. Make sure that it can get there. So there goes to the portal, Creative Live. Test, is that available? Does that look right? Does it have the right title? Are we going to the right place? Are we going to someone else's help page? Now it's going to the press page, the things that the press would see. It's going to the privacy page. Some of these pages are much quicker because they're not going to change, and they're just kind of blurping out some text. And it goes back to the home page, and then the test is done. And you notice down here at the bottom it says that it's gone through all the tests, and all the tests, all the things that we asked it to check have passed. We have similar coverage tests with the bottom nav social link page where it goes out to all the things, or very simple ones. If we want to just say, can we reach the home page? We'll run that one. Now people say, why would you have something as simple as just reaching the home page? Well, because if you would run this in something like Jenkins, you could run it like every 15 minutes. And if there was ever any kind of a reason why someone couldn't reach the home page, then you could have it send somebody email, like somebody in the IT department saying, hey guys, something's up, our site's down, people can't even get to the home page because our automated test is having problems. So sometimes some of these very simple tests, if run on a regular controlled basis by Jenkins continuous integration, can be very valuable to you to make sure that things are working the way that you expect them to work. So all it's going to do is just log in and make sure it can get there, make sure that the title is correct, and then be done. Part of the reason why we break these down into a bunch of smaller tests, some people would say, why don't you just go and test all the pages at once? The problem with that type of a design is that it runs for hours because it's testing every single little thing. It's better to have smaller tests that take maybe a maximum of 10 minutes, and then you can run them in parallel on a bunch of different machines and or even out on the cloud. Another interesting test, reaching the tiles images. Tell the tiles, verify your active resources. When we tell them to do that, basically it goes out to the web page It says, hey, everybody that's at tiles, get into a linked list. We'll walk through the linked list, put each one of those images into a separate web page. Once it's in a separate web page, then we can make sure that there's actually an image there, that it has .jpeg file extension, and we can do a certain amount of testing. We can't figure out if someone used the wrong image for a tile, because only the human eye is going to be able to tell you if the right or the wrong image is there, but we can tell that there is an image associated with that tile. So now it's just going to go out and it's going to, like I say, it's going to go in and figure out all the images attached with all the tiles on the home page and display them for us. It goes through it pretty quickly once it gets going. Yep, there they go. And then it goes back to the home page and says that's good. And it says all tests passed. So basically said that there's some image associated with each one of the tiles on the home page. Next, we're going to take a look at some use case tests. Use case tests do a series of events to do some particular thing that someone would normally do interacting with the program. For instance, we have a use case test here called a login logout test. We have another one that's an enroll cancel test. So what a login logout test is going to do, it's going to activate the login page. Then it's going to fill out the form with a series of information. It's going to say, okay, go ahead and log into the system. And then it's going to make sure that it's logged in, and then it's going to go ahead and log the person back out again. So here we can see the Creative Live page coming up, and see it entering some email and password information. And now it's waiting for the login to happen, because it doesn't always happen right away. So now it's decided that yes, it's logged in, so it's going to go give the logout command, and you can see in the upper right hand corner that the login came back, which means that we're logged out correctly, and then the test is done. There are a lot of synchronization commands involved in doing this, because as you saw, sometimes it had to wait for a page to come up. The Creative Live uses a lot of what's called AJAX controls that don't come up right when the page comes up. I mean, sometimes you get the 200 page loaded message, but one of the controls hasn't drawn itself yet. So there are various commands within the WebDriver interface to allow synchronization with AJAX type objects on the web page. So you can do things like you can say, oh, wait for that item to become available, wait for it to be visible, wait for it to become clickable. You can do all of this on an element by element basis within the web page, which allows you to wait until things happen on the screen, but not just wait 20 seconds every time you do something, because that would make your tests run a lot longer. First, it's going to go into the system and it's going to have to log in. So it's going to enter the username, password, make sure the Remember Me is turned off, and then it's going to click the login button. Then it's going to wait and make sure that it got logged in. So there's lots of synchronization in here to make sure that it waited for things to happen correctly before it goes to the next page. And now you can see this person signed up for 3 classes, so it's just going to go ahead and unenroll them one after the other. It's going to clean that all up. Okay, so now it's got a clean slate. It's going to go back to the home page. It's going to start going through the tiles, looking for one that's not running right now that it can roll in. It's found one, still in motion storytelling on location. So it's going to go ahead and press the enroll button. Alright, so it's signed up, enrollment confirmed. Now it's going to go back to the enrollment form, make sure that it's there, and it's going to press the unenroll button. It's going to go back to the home page and log out and exit. So once we have the framework in place and we've tested some local test functionality, The next step is often to test under multiple browsers. Because of the way I've designed my driver base class, set the browser to Opera, set the browser to Safari, set the browser to Chrome, and run some use case tests. In this case, it's a real simple one because I wanted something that would go pretty fast for the demo. It's going to just go to the home page, a variety of different browsers. You can see right now it's going to do it in Internet Explorer. And then it's going to try it to do it in Firefox. Next it's going to do it in Chrome. Then Opera. And then finally in Safari. So it's just that easy to, do the multiple browser tests for the other tests that we've already set up. Enroll cancel tests where it, logs on, enrolls in a class, cancels out in the class. But because that one takes a little longer, I'm going to go ahead and comment out the Firefox and the Opera and the Safari tests and just let it run with Internet Explorer and Chrome. We've already seen it with Firefox before. But this just kind of will show you that we can run it under a variety of different browsers. Once we have these tests in place, it's just a matter of running them under the different browsers to test to see if the functionality works okay under the different browsers. So there it's running on Chrome, and it's going to fill out the form and log in. It's going to go look for courses it's enrolled, delete them. Now it's going to go look on the home page for a course to register with. Found one. It's going to press the enroll button. Goes and finds out, yes, it's enrolled, deletes it, enrolls it, and then goes back to the home page, logs out, shuts down. And now it's going to run the same test in Internet Explorer. Now we can see that all those tests passed. We can also notice that I have similar tests set up for running on the Mac. Next I'm going to demonstrate the Selenium grid. Selenium grid is made up of a grid and then a group of nodes that hook into that. Without either one of them running, any tests that I'm running against the Selenium grid are going to fail. What I've told this test is that there's a remote WebDriver on localhost 444 before. It's not there, so if I go ahead and try to run this test right now, see, and that shows you what it looks like when a test fails. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go out and I'm going to create a grid hub. And I'm going to go to another machine and I'm going to start up a node. Then the two connect up. And then I can access the hub through a standard web browser because it's sitting at port 4444. So if I go to console, we can see this console comes up and it shows that this remote machine that's hooked up to it basically can handle a series of instances of Firefox, Chrome, and one instance of Internet Explorer. So now if I go and I rerun that test, Firefox test, it's going to go and run that test over on the remote machine. We can see here that the test is actually running, and we should get some feedback from the print lines that I've added. What some companies do is they have everybody who leaves their computer at work basically place it in the Selenium grid before they go home for the day, and then they can run a bunch of tests in parallel, off of a timer sometime during the night and have all the machines run that test together. What other people do is they run the same type of tests, but they do it in a cloud-based grid. It shows that this test is finished, all tests are passed. We could also put a Mac machine into the grid. And then if I had Mac tests, I would just throw them into the grid. It would find the Mac machine, it would run the Mac tests on the Mac, it would find the Windows machines and run the Windows tests on the Windows. Next, I'm going to demonstrate the Sauce Labs grid. Sauce Labs is a company that provides cloud-based solutions to gridding your tests with different operating systems and different browsers. They support automated tests, and they also support manual tests. Let's say you worked for a company and somebody called you up and they said, hey, I have a problem with your web application running on Windows XP with a Firefox 8. That's the Firefox 10. Firefox 10. So basically what you can do is you can run not only automated tests on the cloud, but you can also run manual tests. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and tell Sauce Labs that I want to run a Windows XP virtual machine along with Firefox 10, and I want to test creativelive.com. So if I do that, it's going to go ahead and build up an environment for me. So it's going to set up a new browser, allocate a cloud machine, figuring the operating system, installing tools, and there we are. So that shows me what it would look like in that environment, and I can do everything that I would normally do, only now I'm out there in the cloud doing it on this really old operating system with a really old browser. Once it's done with either a manual or automated system, you can go in there and you can see basically the tests you ran. You can see when you do a post, deletes. This happens much more when you're running automated tests. And it also creates a little movie that shows you what happened, while the test. So if you uncovered some bug or something like that, you have a little movie later on that shows you, what happened, what you did while you were there. So it's a valuable tool for manual testing as well as automated testing, in that it lets you do it in different browsers, different operating systems, without having to have a whole room full of machines at your disposal to be able to do that. And here's some tests that I've created using the Sauce grid. Said that I've got Windows 8, reach the home page tests, multi-browser tests, Windows 7 multi-browser reach home page, multi-browser nav. Here's some snow leopard tests. Here's some lion tests. Here's some Linux, some Droid. Basically a smattering of a whole bunch of different types of tests that we can all run, out on the Selenium grid. Let's go ahead and here's some Windows 8 multi-browser tests. Let's go ahead and just do in Internet Explorer. On Windows 8, Internet Explorer 10, we're going to go ahead and have it run through our use case, our login, logout test. And while it's running, you can actually go into full screen mode here and watch it run if you want to. It's can be kind of interesting sometimes to watch the job actually in process, running out there in the cloud on the Sauce Labs grid. So there we see the same login, logout test that we've seen running, in various environments. Now it's actually running out there in the cloud. And it does the thing that we were talking about where it records the movie of it running, and then we can see little images of all the different posts that we did, kind of walk you through the programming, through what we did with our tests, as well as having a movie playback. How the application would work and look on an iOS device, such as an iPad or an iPhone. You can run them out on the Selenium grid as well. I'm going to go ahead and start these running, and we'll go take a look at the web app running on an iPad and an iPhone. So we can go ahead and take a look, view it full screen. And so here is an iOS simulator for an iPad running on the Selenium grid. And there we have, the bottom navigation screens running on an iOS simulator and an iPad. So we can get a good idea of, how it looks, how it works. It's doing all the same tests that it was doing on another operating system, only now it's running on an iPad simulator, and now it's running it on the iPhone. So we'll go take a look at it running on an iPhone. And so now we can see the same tests that we were just running locally on local browsers, and now we would see how it would be working, on a smaller device, what the person would be seeing, how the menu items are showing up on this much smaller footprinted screen. What they see as far as the different parts of the program. We still get the same feedback. It's told us that they went through those tests and that they passed. If they'd have failed, we've seen the output here, and these would have turned red. So it's basically saying those tests that I just ran will work fine on the iPad simulator or the iPhone simulator. If you'd like to see the same tests running in an Android device, very simple to say, okay, I want to look at these tests running on an Android 4 tablet. I want to see them running on a Android phone. Next, I'm going to show you just a very little bit about JMeter. So JMeter is a stress testing tool that allows you to pretend to be 1 user, 3 users, 100 users, 1,000 users. It allows you to stress test your applications, the web applications out there on the web. Fire it up. You just need to run a batch file like so many things. And then you get the JMeter console. And I just basically made a little test to run through the top menu nav options at the Sweetlight Studios website. I did not use a Creative Live website on purpose. If you start hammering on a website with a whole bunch of concurrent users, it can affect performance. So typically this type of test should be performed, late at night, probably fired off by some type of a timing tool to allow them to run when you don't have a lot of users on your system. As far as the our Sweetlight Studios website is concerned, I'm not so worried about that because we do not have the same type of traffic, and also it's mine, so if I did something wrong to it, it wouldn't be a problem. The way you use JMeter is you have to do quite a bit of configuration to get it to work the way you want it to. And there are these features that you add. The first thing you have to do is set up a thread group, and your thread group lets you control the number of threads, i.e. the number of users. So I can say, this one, usually when I start out, I'm just doing very simple tests with a single user, ramp up time of a second, and just one time through the loop. Okay, and then slowly I ramp up from there. There's different things that you add to the thread group. Here I'm adding basically a listener that'll find out what's happening and put them all into a nice table for me. I've added the root URL to the sweetlightstudios.com port number 80 so that I don't have to keep adding that in all of these test cases that I'd be running. In this particular test, it's a very easy one. I'm just basically running through a bunch of the web pages in a very quick manner. The JMeter testing system uses what's called a headless browser. So it can go a lot faster because it's not actually trying to display stuff on the screen. It just sends out a request to the website, captures what it sends back, and then it can do tests based on that. It's also possible to tie this in with the Selenium tests and tie it in with JUnit tests as well. If you fire it off with Jenkins and have it running, chewing up a bunch of resources, then you can also fire off a regular Selenium test at the same time and see how it affects your regular test. Does it make your screen start updating, taking a minute, 5 minutes instead of coming back in 10 seconds or whatever they were coming back in before? I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I would use this once I have it all set up. Start the test. So here it goes, and it's going out and it's navigating all those different pages, and you can see that it's done it in a very quick manner. It gives you feedback about the sampling time, the latency, how many bytes. You can see a correlation between the bigger pages and the number of bytes. Then when you're happy with it working with one, of course, then you have other tests where here's one where I'm doing it with 3. So this time I'm doing 3 users and still only one time through the loop. You need to be careful when you're running these tests where you're running them and how you're running them. So there it goes, it's running away with 3 users, and if we expand our thread name, we can see here's the different users and how they're hammering on the different pages. And you can see that test is taking a little bit longer. We can see some increases in the latency at certain places. So just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and up it, and we'll see see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and say, go ahead and hammer on my site as if you're 100 users, and go ahead and do that 10 times. So that's going to do 1,000 tests. We'll see if it can handle that. So I'm going to go back to the results in the table. I'm going to go ahead and clear all, and then I'm going to let that run. And we can see that all these tests passed, and I didn't get locked out of a system. Well, not yet. Now we can see some of the tests have started to fail. And probably somewhere along the chain from my internet service provider, they've said he's going and hitting that website too fast, too many times. we can't let him do that. Of course, these kind of tests work a whole lot better when you're sitting behind a firewall, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it. So at this point, you can see that, somewhere along the chain, they decided that I was hitting that website too quickly, and so they've locked me out at this point. But I got quite a few tests done before that happened. Hopefully they'll, if I don't keep running this type of a test, they'll let me back in before too long. So that's the danger of running this type of a performance test, why you should be running it late at night, why you should be telling the guys in your IT department before you run this type of a test. So after several minutes, it appears that the temporary lockout has been lifted, so I'm back able to log into Sweetlight Studios again. That's kind of some of the dangers that can happen and why it's really good to do this type of testing on test systems, behind firewalls, not out in the wild world. Next, I'm going to talk about Jenkins Continuous Integration. Jenkins Continuous Integration is a tool for running other jobs from the command line. We can basically see that what it does is it goes out to the POM, which is where Maven gets its information, and it does a Maven test, and then -p, and this is the tests that are inside the POM that then run the tests back for me. I've also set up email notifications with this system, so basically if something goes wrong with the build, then it's going to send me an email saying there was something wrong, it was an unstable build, for some reason it didn't work right. This is particularly good if you're going to run things on a regular time basis, and they can go out, test things, send you an email if something goes wrong. So it sends me emails for unstable builds, and it builds itself periodically once a day. But we can also make it run whenever we want to. So I can just say, go ahead and build. I'm going to say build now, and it's going to go and basically do a Maven build and run process. Because I have it running locally, we see it basically, pull up a browser window on the screen. Do that a couple times. So next I'm going to run the test again, and I'm going to purposefully make it fail so we can see what happens in a failure condition. This is set up to run every day. It goes out to the Sweetlight Studios website. It tries to load the home page a couple times, and if it succeeds, it goes on with life and tries it again the next day. Nothing happens. But if it fails, so I'm going to go ahead and just close it when it tries to open, so that when it's going to go look for the home page information and go, hey, it's not there. For some reason I wasn't able to get to the home page. But I can do some things. I could fire up the window and kind of do that kind of stuff. Okay, now we can see that it has turned a yellow ball here and basically saying that it had an unstable build. You can go and look at the console output that was created when it ran the job, and you can see there are test failures. There's an error, there were failures, there were errors. And now if we run it again and it becomes stable again, it's going to send me another message saying that it's working again. You can also trigger it to run like when there's check-ins, when people do check-ins to a version and control system, meaning there's something new out there, they've done a new build, okay, then it's going to automatically trigger some automated tests to run against the build to verify that the build worked correctly. The Jenkins build is back to stable for the SLS homepage stuff. So it's reported, the problem showing up, it's reported that it's back to stable. So that's kind of how Jenkins reports on its status through the email system. The other thing that's really nice about Jenkins, let's go back to the dashboard, is that because it's running things from the command line, we can run multiple jobs. This is where you can start getting the parallelism going. So for instance, I could fire off this all coverage test job and start it running. And so it's running here in a window, and pretty soon it'll start bringing up its windows. And I can run an enroll cancel test. And it's going to start running that in another command line window. I could run a login logout test. And it's going to start that running in another command window. And I'll go ahead and do the SLS homepage test again. So you can see that I now have 4 jobs running at the same time, and I imagine there are a variety of windows are going to start popping up here, and we can see the thing basically doing parallelism in the tests. Now that means that if you set up your tests correctly, then you could have a whole bunch of tests running, have them running on grids, on the sauce grid, on multiple machines. This is how you can get your parallelism going using the Jenkins continuous integration system. So we can see all these tests running here, doing various things, all in parallel. And so that's probably one of the best things to be using it for. And wouldn't have to set up all these tests manually. I could have said, and I want you to run all these tests. And someone changed something about the site or on a timer. Let's run all these tests every night at midnight, and they would all kick off and do all the testing, come in the next morning, and you've tested everything every night. And if something goes wrong, send an email to people telling them something went wrong. Well, you can do it in the middle of the day for that matter. It's showing you Jenkins continuous integration running multiple tests in parallel. So that brings to a close the demo that I gave today about doing Selenium 2 WebDriver automation and all the various tools that I use to do that. I hope you got a good idea of all the things that I have to bring to the table and what I can do to help a company automate their testing.